podcast about baseball and whether money does buy happiness. I'm Hannah Kaiser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Kreiser, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. We went to a baseball game last night featuring a team that we will be talking about later. And if you know where we live, which you do because it's New York, you'll be able to figure that out. But before we get to that, we're going to talk through some injuries, some old news stories. And then in the end, we're going to talk about pet rocks, apparently. You did that segment, so it's going to be news to me. All right, let's talk about what's happening in baseball. The conceit of this podcast is bandwagoning. I know for a fact that you wanted to bandwagon the Pittsburgh Pirates because you are interested in a higher degree of difficulty than I am as someone who bandwagoned the Rays. We should talk about that real quick, how my bandwagon is doing. But first, will you be bandwagoning the Pirates now that Oneil Cruz will not be on the Pirates?
You know, I'm not going to bandwagon them this week. I want to see how it shakes out a little bit. But they were looking pretty bandwagonable. And speaking of degree of difficulty of bandwagoning things, I want to talk about a mention of bandwagoning I saw in the wild, in the news, not in the sports world, but in the context of everyday life. So AI is a big thing right now, artificial intelligence, and you can go on websites that will make images of things for you based on what you type. And the Pope has become the star of these. Have you seen this?
The big jacket.
The big puffy jacket, yes. So the Pope was pictured wearing a big puffy Balenciaga jacket that looked like his robes, except if they were, high fashion. And that was fake. That was extremely fake. He did not do that. He does not have a Balenciaga Pope jacket that I'm aware of. But the New York Times wrote about this, and they said, that the Pope keeps popping up in strange situations inspired by this and other things of the Pope that have gone viral. So on Reddit, someone said, quote, "I had to get involved in the Pope thing." And then another Reddit user replied, "I'm jumping on the Pope bandwagon," while he shared an image of the pontiff speaking to a crowd of bikers. So I want to know, what is the weirdest real-life bandwagon you have ever jumped on?
All right. So first of all, are you implying that was a misuse of bandwagon, or is this person actually bandwagoning the Pope?
Well,
Are they bandwagoning fake Pope images?
Yes, he's bandwagoning fake Pope images. So that is the weird bandwagon in this case, which I think is a higher degree of difficulty than the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I'm curious what the weirdest bandwagon
I don't know that that's true. Wait, my friend, I beg to differ. I do not think that the Pope is a more difficult bandwagon than the Pittsburgh Pirates. And unfortunately, I don't mean that. Fortunately, I don't mean that as an insult to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think a lot of people bandwagon the Pope, and that is a topic we shall not discuss any further.
They put the Pope at Burning Man. Anyway,
I'm reverse bandwagoning anything to do with AI. That's not what you asked, but it's what I'm going to be telling you. I feel like this is going to backfire, but I do not understand it, and I will not understand it. What is the weirdest real life thing I have bandwagoned?
I'll tell you mine while you think about it.
Yeah,
when
you tell me
the
yours.
Cronut thing. Remember the Cronut thing in New York, where
You did not.
Dominic
You
Ansel.
bandwagoned
No.
Cronuts?
Listen. No. Did not bandwagon the Cronut. When they were a big deal, Dominic Ansel Bakery, I think that's what it was called, mixed a croissant and a donut. Everyone went nuts. That was around the time I moved to New York, and instead of getting into cronuts, a friend and I went around the city testing all of the best croissants, just the regular croissants. It was like a retro bandwagon of one piece of the trendy thing. There was an Instagram. We kept a spreadsheet. It was a whole thing. So I think that is the weirdest bandwagon I have hopped on.
What's the best croissant?
Well, it was at Arcade Bakery, which was a place in Tribeca, but that place is gone now. So I'm sorry to say you don't get to try it.
That's not embarrassing at all. I thought you were going to go with something like embarrassing. That's not embarrassing. That's
I didn't say embarrassing. I said weirdest. Yeah.
I've been with my husband a very long time, and he never lets me forget like any of the various style eras that I have had. And I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it's like this comes back to shame me a lot. Like I'll see something, or a celebrity will be dressed a certain way, and I'll be like, "Did you see that?" And he'll be like, "Wow, that is extremely you, 2017." And I'll be like, "You know what? I don't like you having this catalogic memory of everything I was ever into." I'll pick out like I'll be like, "What do you think of this shirt?" And he'll be like, "That's a color you haven't worn since 2016." I don't like that. So that's not strange either, but that is like, I am very prone to bandwagoning, and this is reflected in my various style eras. You know what? Eras are a fine thing to have. Taylor Swift have really mainstreamed the ideas that people go through different eras, and that is not just natural, but in fact quite cool, and something you should embrace. We should work our way back to baseball somehow. I had such a good transition. You know what? I had such a good transition from the intro to what we were going to talk about, and then you sidetracked us talking about croissants, and now we got to get back to talking about the Pirates.
Pittsburgh Pirates.
Or the Rays. No, you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about my bandwagon. The Rays, they're still good. I bandwagoned them last week. It's looking great. This is like 2 years ago, we did a Shohei Ohtani episode on the bandwagon, and we did it like the first month of the season. And then for the rest of the season, I was like, we should have held off. That was it's a lot more content we could have. Yeah. It's a lot more content we could have talked about. That's how I feel about the Tampa Bay Rays. I bandwagoned them in our first regular season episode of this podcast, and now I've become convinced that they're going to go 162-0. So. I was in on them early. Okay, talk about the Pirates. Sorry.
Well, so the Pirates are a team, unlike the Rays, that has not sustained success at all recently. And they've been in a rebuild, sort of understandable, although it's been a particularly bleak one. And for the first few games this year, it looked like they were kind of on the upswing. Brian Reynolds, who's been kind of talking about a extension with the team, but that may have fizzled, looks incredible. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball. He hit a little league home run a couple days ago that was extremely fun and kind of capped off the beginning of his season, that everything was going right for the Pirates. And then this weekend, really tall, really exciting shortstop Oneil Cruz slid awkwardly into home, broke his ankle, is out till at least August. And all of the Pirates' optimism I was going to muster is a little dampened, just because he was really the visual centerpiece of the Pirates. Brian Reynolds, very good baseball player. Not a baseball player you look at and say, man, I really need to watch every at-bat of his. Oneil Cruz, anything could happen. He could hit a ball so hard that a fan in the third row of the outfield gets shot backwards by the force of it. He could strike out and his helmet could fly 15 feet. He could hit a triple, even though he's 6'7". Anything could happen with Oneil Cruz, and now that's not going to be on the table for the Pirates. So I just want to say, I think the Pirates are inspiring in that they have played much better to start this year and are worth watching, but it's a little bit of a bummer that Oneil Cruz got hurt.
It's a lot of a bummer that Oneil Cruz got hurt, because it's been a long time bummer in Pittsburgh to be a Pirates fan. They have a beautiful ballpark, so that's nice. And you're right, that this was like... they weren't even like a trendy pick for a team on the upswing at the outset of this season. And so that would have been lovely for their fans. You did skip over the most cinematic part of Oneil Cruz getting hurt, which, again, bad thing. We're not happy that it happened. But the bench is cleared.
There was a
fight,
the
slide... They thought the slide was a little late. The catcher took exception to it. But he was hurt. So he was hurt. And so the trainer came out to check on him, and then everybody else came out to fight each other. The trainer,
I think the catcher
protected him with his body.
The catcher
it was beautiful.
The catcher Sebi Zavala seemed to say something to Cruz while he was on the ground. I couldn't tell what. And Carlos Santana, veteran on the Pirates, who was on deck, stepped up and confronted him, and then there was shoving.
They were shoving, but Oneil Cruz did not participate because he was lying on the ground in pain. And, trainer, whoever you are, shout out to you, protected him with his body. It felt very paternal, very sort of raw. I was like, oh, this trainer, he's going to take one for the team, it won't matter because Oneil Cruz is still going to be out for, what is it, like 4 to 6 months. But I really, that's a trainer who's takes his job seriously. That's the most consequential thing I think that probably happened this past week. We're really, really late to the Tyler O'Neill gets called out by Ali Marmol for not hustling, and then calls out Ali Marmol for calling him out and for doing so in public. News that's like already a week old. But as I was saying before we got started recording, it still has legs, I guess. People are still interested in this topic. I was going to ask you what your take is, but I think probably every possible take about this has been took.
The take has been taken.
Instead, I will ask you, do you think we should read into how Tyler O'Neill does, let's say, the rest of the month as to whether or not this was a good move?
On Ali Marmol's part,
yes,
no,
like was this lighting a fire under his ass, like in an effective way, or was this like putting a guy on blast who didn't deserve it, and it doesn't matter if he deserves it because it's going to backfire?
I think the war of words publicly is generally a sign that any attempt at lighting a fire was not successful, that it was just a weird fight in public, which is never fun. So I think the only thing we should read into is the Cardinals coming into the season had too many outfielders. Like, usually a good problem to have, but they legitimately have too many outfielders. They have the rookie Jordan Walker, who has hit in every major league game of his career so far. They have Dylan Carlson. They have Lars Nootbaar, who's hurt right now. They have Alec Burleson, who's stepped in to fill space while Nootbaar's out. They have too many outfielders. And O'Neill, who had a great season in 2021 and a very down season in 2022, just seemed like one of the options for a potential trade. And now that he is publicly fighting with Ali Marmol, he seems kind of like the only option for a trade. So I would read into it only in the sense that if the manager and Tyler O'Neill don't get along, maybe this means that Tyler O'Neill is more available as a potential trade candidate than he was before.
Which means that the Cardinals, if we're grading whether or not this was a galaxy brain good move or like a run-of-the-mill temper got the best of you bad move, if he is a trade target, it was a bad move because sort of telegraphing that he's the odd man out in that clubhouse really going to hurt the kind of bargain you can drive on the market for that player. You know what I mean? Like, it's also, if people think he doesn't hustle, that's not great for his trade value either. So not a great job by Ali Marmol. I don't know. I don't want to hate that because I want to think that like managers should be allowed to do things, and talking to sort of various people around the game. Some people's reactions have been like, well, that's great because, managers, their power is diminished generally sort of in relation to the front office in recent years. Also, nobody ever gets called out. There's a whole lot of discourse around how like this generation is too sensitive that I don't care to get into. But like, I don't want to say that a manager is a bad manager or even done a bad job at managing in that particular instance, just because something sort of broke through or cut against the grain or whatever. I like Ali Marmol. I think he takes his job seriously. But there's really little evidence. My point is sort of, the point that I was getting at initially is like, there's really little evidence to support the fact that like, no, I'm on to something here, let him cook kind of thing. Like, I think it's just, it seemed bad in the moment and it doesn't seem better now. And if they intend to trade him, that doesn't seem like it did a good job at sort of furthering those goals. So yeah.
No, very emotional jujitsu is a very hard sport to score.
Yes, exactly. That's sort of my point. Is that like I wanted to be like maybe he's onto something, but I don't think he is. Which means it falls into the category. Watch this transition. It falls into the category of news cycles that feel very important at the time. Feels like everybody's talking about it. And then we'll have a whole bunch of them over the course of a very long baseball season. Baseball seasons, don't know if you've heard, they're very long.
Very long.
And by the end, you'll be like, what was that we were all talking about in April? Which brings me to our game this week, which is called I actually didn't call it anything, but I'm going to come up with it, which is called, what was it we were talking about? In that voice. We are going to see how well you, Zach Kreiser, remember these types of very short-lived, not necessarily, well, yes, very short-lived or very sort of specific to what they were news cycles. So not
Momentary.
Like who hit the most home runs. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Things from last year that were not necessarily reflected in like what happened by the end of the year and the stats and all that kind of thing. It'll make a ton of sense once we get playing. So let's do that right now. I'm going to ask you 10 probably questions. I baked in a lot of bonus points. So producer John, if you want to keep track of how many points he gets out of a possible number of points, I did the math last night and I think there's a possible 17 points, but I was counting while I was watching a baseball game. So, we'll see what happens. Okay, let's play. You ready?
As ready as I'm going to be.
Okay. These are in roughly chronological order. So, after the lockout. You remember that. There was a lockout.
There was a lockout.
After the lockout, Rob Manfred famously said that he needed to repair his relationship with the players. To that effect, on opening day, every player received a note, not a personalized note, but a note from the commissioner along with what small token of peace?
Beats headphones.
Bose headphones. I don't know if we're giving you a point for that. I'm gonna let that. I'm gonna leave that up to John to decide how to
score that as a half point.
Half a point. I have a point. Okay.
I feel like players like April. Beats more. Anyway.
Yes, maybe they still don't like Rob Manfred, so maybe that's what's wrong. In late April, Miguel Cabrera was intentionally walked while one hit away from 3,000, drawing boos from the Detroit fans. They were in Detroit at the time. Which team intentionally walked Miguel Cabrera?
Oh, I really don't remember this. I have a guess because I'm just going to guess based on context clues and say it was the Chicago White Sox under Tony La Russa.
No, it was. They might. I just realized. I realized in asking this question that potentially like another team might have also done this, but there was one very famous team because the team that did it was the Tigers, with the Tigers leading the Yankees by 1 run and 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th. Yeah,
the Tigers didn't walk him. The Yankees walked him.
Oh, sorry, the Yankees. Sorry, I said the Yankees, and then I launched into reading an explanation. So the Yankees walked him with the Tigers leading the Yankees by 1 run and with 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th. Cabrera stepped at the plate with runners on second and third with first base open. Yankees manager Aaron Boone elected to have the pitcher intentionally walk him to load the bases. That drew boos. The reason this was kind of the most infamous version of this, if you got walked at other points, sort of in his lead up to 3,000, not as infamous, because then Austin Meadows followed that with a double to score, and the Tigers went on to win 3-0. So not only was he intentionally walked, but it backfired, robbing fans at Comerica, that's where they play, of seeing Miguel Cabrera get his 3,000th hit. Okay. You didn't remember that one at all?
Nope.
Let's see how you're doing this next one. In mid-May, a team managed to lose a no-hitter. The starting pitcher struck out 9 over 7 1/3 innings, but walked 5 batters, including 2 in the 8th. Then the relief pitcher who came in walked the bases loaded, and a run scored on a fielder's choice. Which team lost their own no-hitter? And for a bonus point, which team won?
The Cincinnati Reds lost the no-hitter. Hunter Green started.
Yes.
And I believe the Pirates won.
Wow. You get the point, the bonus point, and I'm going to give you a third bonus point for remembering Hunter Green started. You know what? In reading about the lost no-hitter, I learned that losing no-hitters is not as uncommon as it feels like it should be. Like this, it was all like, this is the first time it's happened in like 5 years. And I was like, feels like it should be longer. Okay. Question number 4. You definitely remember this news story. So I had to try to like dig down to figure out what the question was going to be because everybody remembers this news story. In June, Tommy Pham slapped someone over a fantasy football beef and in the midst of the fallout accused Mike Trout of being the worst commissioner. Who did he slap? And for a bonus point, what was the dispute over? Sort of the specifics.
He slapped Jock Peterson.
Yes, he did.
And I believe the dispute, oh man, the dispute was something about waiver wire rules and like the order of who gets to pick up who, but I don't know if I got that all the way to the specific point.
I don't know fantasy football, so I'm going to tell you what it was. And then, again, Producer John, you're going to have to make a judgment call as to whether or not this was close enough. He did, in fact, slap Jock Peterson due to the Giant slugger alleged misuse of the injured reserve. Is that
that
related to
really
what you
count.
were saying?
No, not exactly.
No. Okay, you get one of a possible 2 points. That one I needed to do that news cycle because it was such a good news cycle.
It was.
But at every turn, it felt like the question was going to be too easy. Like it was going to be like, who is the commissioner of that league? But everybody remembers that it was Mike Trout because Mike Trout suddenly had to answer for his bad commissioning, despite not being anywhere near the slap when it happened. Okay, question 5. You got a lot of possible points on this question. Question 5, who was the first manager fired in 2022?
It was Joe Girardi.
Yes, it was on June 3rd when the team was 22-29. That firing panned out perfectly. Okay, get an extra point for every other manager who was fired during the season that you can name.
Oh, okay. So Charlie Montoyo, the Blue Jays fired Charlie Montoyo.
Even though they had a winning record at the time. But yes, you're correct.
Well, does it count if they were fired after the season or only during the season?
Who were you thinking of? Because there's one that was like on the last day.
Don Mattingly with the Marlins.
No, I was thinking of Mike Matheny.
How about the other one I was thinking of was Mike Matheny with the Royals.
Yes. Didn't I just say that? I feel like I just gave that one to you. There's more. You're missing a real obvious one.
Jace Tingler with Texas.
That was not last year.
Oh, that was not last year. Who was the man? Oh, Chris Woodward was the manager last year. That's it. He's the wrong Texas affiliated guy. Chris Woodward got fired last year. And
the one that you're missing, he shaved his hair into a mohawk.
Oh,
but
Joe
we never
Madden
got to see
fired.
it.
That's right. Wow. Yeah. The Angels really. So, and then Tony La Russa didn't get fired. I think he sort of quit, but that's the
You really want to talk about Tony La Russa, and have I got good news for you because we will be talking about Tony La Russa, but not yet. Question number 6. All season long, it was a storyline that you had to be vaccinated to travel to Toronto, and so unvaxxed players would be exposed as such when their teams made the trip. One player who was traded at the deadline was not able to make the trip with his first team, but did make the trip with his post-deadline team. Who was that player?
Well, there's a player I'm thinking of who was traded to the Blue Jays. Does that count as the trip?
It is not who I am talking about, but I realized that after the fact, and so I will give you one of a now possible 2 points for naming that player.
Well, Whit Merrifield couldn't make the trip before the deadline, and then he was traded to the Blue Jays and clearly made it work somehow. The player who got traded and got the vaccine, oh man, I am pretty sure he went to the Yankees. Was it oh man.
It was notable because earlier in the season, when asked about his sort of lack of vaccine status, he had specifically said that he would consider getting vaccinated for a postseason bound team if they were scheduled to face the Blue Jays, thereby both insulting everyone who cares about the health of everyone else and also the current team he was playing for.
I really thought Whit Merrifield said that, so I am now doubly confused.
You giving up?
I don't remember who it was.
It was Andrew Benintendi.
Oh, he was on the same team. Yes.
The Royals. He insulted the Kansas City Royals on his way out. He was just like, no, I did not get vaccinated because 1, don't care about other people. And 2, you guys aren't going anywhere. And then he got traded to the Yankees and he got vaccinated so he could play the Blue Jays. I'll give you 1 point for that question. Question 7. Who almost foiled the Juan Soto trade and how?
Eric Hosmer almost foiled the Juan Soto trade by using his no trade protection to decline to go to the Nationals.
Bonus point. Who ended up getting shipped from the Padres to the Nationals instead?
Luke Voigt.
Yes.
Who immediately got overshadowed by Joey Meneses.
Yes. The worst day of Luke Voigt's life, probably. Just minding his own business, not getting traded to the Nationals, and oh, whoops, nope, you are. Okay, now it's time to talk about Tony La Russa. Question 8. Tony La Russa made a lot of questionable managerial decisions. I tried to figure out some way to quantify this, but just tell me what the most infamous was.
The most...
It really stood out.
Yes, the most infamous was he intentionally walked a batter after his pitcher got to 2 strikes on the batter because of some logic that no one understood about it was more likely to become a hit then.
Do you remember who the batters were? I'm giving you got this question right, but I'm just curious.
I believe it was maybe I think they were playing the Guardians, and I'm feeling like that's wrong.
It's wrong.
Okay. I don't know who it was.
He called for an intentional walk on Trey Turner, who had a 1-2 count at the time, to bring up Max Muncy, saying that he was going for the left-on-left matchup. But at the time, Muncy actually had a better batting average against lefties. And nobody has a good batting average with 2 strikes on them. Okay. Question 9. In a sort of roundabout, but not that roundabout way, a pitcher wound up being awarded $100,000 for calling out fat shaming on Twitter. Who was that pitcher?
In a sort of roundabout way, a pitcher was awarded $100,000 for calling out fat shaming on Twitter?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what this is.
Who's a pitcher that tweets?
Several of them? I don't know.
Just pick one.
Marcus Stroman.
My friend, you think Marcus Stroman would be on the right side of that news cycle?
I don't know. I don't know what this is.
Alek Manoah, dude, I believe it was actually a radio person, tweeted about Alejandro Kirk, quote, embarrassing the sport. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay, that happened.
This escaped me.
Okay, Alejandro Kirk was running around the bases. Somebody tweeted that video and said that this was an embarrassment to the sport. And Alek Manoah quote tweeted that guy and said, go ahead and tell that 8-year-old who is 10 pounds overweight that he should quit now. Let Kirk inspire those kids to continue to chase their dreams and chase greatness. And then later, Dove, the body wash company, what are we calling them, gave Alek Manoah $100,000 for promoting body positivity. I love that for Alek Manoah.
Excellent job, Alek Manoah.
And then he donated it to charity. Okay. Last question. What was the Phillies celebration song?
Dancing on My Own, but it's not the original Robin version. It's a remix.
It was the remix by Callum Scott.
There we go.
I actually wasn't sure. I was like, that's either going to be incredibly easy or it's going to have been a thing that you just didn't pay that much attention to, because I don't think we ever talked about that at any point last year.
I like Dancing on My Own. It's a great tune. So
it's a great tune. Bonus question. Question 11, bonus question. Not related to any of the other questions. This is a postseason question because I wasn't sure if we should stop before or after the postseason. So we got one bonus postseason question. How long was the Mariners' final game and what was the final score?
18 innings, 2-0.
18 innings, 1-0. Oh,
I couldn't remember if there was a
one
man
of a possible
on.
2 points.
Yeah.
Only run came on the Jeremy Pena home run, foreshadowing his World Series MVP. How did Zach do? John says that Zach got a 15.5 points for possible out of possible. We don't know how many points. Sorry, I did a terrible.
There were too many bonus
I did
points.
a terrible job reading that. But congrats on your 15.5 points and how well you remember most of the news from last year. How well do you think you'll remember the Sally Marmol thing?
Well, now that we did a podcast about it, possibly pretty well.
Pretty well. It's hard to tell in real time what are going to be the things that we totally forget. Like in thinking about making this quiz, I was trying to remember what the thing was that you said if the team is bad, we'll definitely remember this. And if the team is good, we won't remember it. And it took me a little while to remember what it was. It was Anthony Rendon getting in a fight with a fan.
Yes.
That is absolutely the kind of thing that like next year it'll be like, who got in a fight with a fan the first week of the season? Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the San Diego Padres. Okay, so we should probably talk about the San Diego Padres because everybody else is talking about them. This is the segment that you don't know because we haven't done this podcast very long, but it's generally entitled We Were Wondering. And this week, it's what everybody else was wondering, and it is, are the Padres spending too much money? Which is not something people need to be worried about, but they really, really are. So we figured that we would take that as an opportunity to talk about them and also take the fact that they are currently in town playing the Mets. We both went to the game yesterday to also talk about them. We really tried to overthink this one to be like, what is it to say about the Padres? And the thing to say about them is they have the third highest payroll in baseball, despite being in a relatively small media market. The 15 of the first 20 years of the century, they finished in the bottom third in team spending. That's according to ESPN. And now they have the third highest payroll. Around $240 million. But more than just a high payroll, they have a high payroll because they offer lots of money to every star who becomes available. And literally, that they don't actually have every star who becomes available, but they do offer them a lot of money.
They tried for almost every star available.
They tried for almost every star available. Like they got turned down by a lot of players this offseason and still wound up having one of the most exciting off seasons. The current record is 6-5. They didn't look great heading into Atlanta at the start of the weekend last week. And then they took 3 of 4 from Atlanta. There was some stat about how no one has won 3 games in a row at home for the Braves or away for them at home for the Braves in a very long time. And then they did. They looked really good and really fun. They did lots of fun things in that game. Nelson Cruz, he's old. He had 6 RBIs in the game on Sunday. He had a home run. It was very exciting. Where do you want to take this? Do you want to just recap it?
I want to talk about the leap that the Padres made, because I think that's the thing people are focused on. It's not that, can a baseball team spend this much money? Yes, they can. They do it all the time. The Yankees do it. I was looking up, the Angels have been running a top 10 payroll since 2004 consecutively. At no point have they not had a top 10 payroll, and look what that's gotten them. So you can do this. If you are a baseball owner and you have a baseball team and you want to spend $200 million a year-ish interminably and get no wins out of it, you can absolutely do it. It is possible. We have proof. I think the thing that distinguishes the Padres is they went from never really spending a ton to spending an exorbitant amount and changing the entire way people think about their franchise. So if you look at, kind of what ESPN was referencing, if you look at their collective balance tax number, their payroll number by MLB's calculations, they were 28th in 2017. And this year, 6 years later, they are third. They went from $98.8 million by that calculation in 2017 to $280.5 million by the calculation this year, which is roughly almost 3 times as much. So I wanted to go back through some teams that have made big leaps. Do you remember kind of there are 2 teams that kind of in the past 5 to 7 years have made somewhat similar leaps? Do you know who they are?
Oh my gosh. Now I'm going to be embarrassed. The Rangers.
Well, they're not there yet. They're going to come up, but they're not there yet. They're only 10th in payroll. Yes, the Mets. The Mets are the big one.
Okay.
The Mets went from 27th to 1st in 6 years between, when the Wilpons still had them to Steve Cohen doing Steve Cohen things now.
I don't think I realized they were that low.
They bottomed out the year before they went to the World Series. In 2014, they were 27th at a $98 million payroll, which, is less than the Padres were spending before they started going.
The Phillies?
The Phillies are the other one. They went from 26th to 3rd in 5 years, from 2016 to 2021. Obviously, the Phillies spend a lot of money a lot of the time, and they were in a pretty concerted rebuild, but it still shows the level of money that was added. And until, mid-October of last year, that was viewed as a failure and kind of a boondoggle. And then suddenly it was fine. So I think that gets a little bit at what the Padres are going for, and they've certainly already gotten closer than the Phillies did until last October. The other teams that have made big jumps, the Astros are the really obvious one from slightly before. Between 2013 and 2019, they went from 30th to 5th and went to several World Series in there, so that makes sense. That one tracks. The Rangers, earlier Rangers, when they were under John Daniels and started going to the World Series, they jumped from 26th to 7th. 2010 to 2012, they jumped 26th to 7th, which is a lot. But it turns out the deals that got them there were incredible. They signed Josh Hamilton to a 2-year deal, during which he went nuts and then was never good again. They signed Adrian Beltre to possibly the best free agent contract in the history of baseball, 5 years, $80 million, during which he became a Hall of Famer. And they signed Yu Darvish for 6 years and $56 million. And that turned out great. Also, I'll mention AJ Preller, Padres GM, worked for the Rangers at the time. Yes. That was where he was and kind of how he built his reputation. So that's the backdrop here. Is I think we're really focused on that leap. Mm-hmm. And the implication, tell me if I'm wrong, is that, oh no, the worry is they spent too much too fast on these specific players, and these specific players aren't going to be good forever, and it's going to all crash and burn. Is that roughly the concern?
That's not my concern. Don't make it sound like it's my concern. But yes, I believe that is roughly the concern. Texas, also where AJ Preller met Nelson Cruz for the first time, decided he liked him, wanted to bring him in. Now they're 6 RBIs later, probably has more than that actually on the season. It's panning out. I think actually the Phillies comp, while you were talking, I was thinking about how the Phillies comp is a potentially very apt one. I guess we don't know yet, because the Phillies, you're right. The Phillies went from, this was a failure of a rebuild, to, no, it's not. We love them, just by making the World Series, by being a wild card team that wouldn't have even been in the postseason in prior years, and then going all the way to the World Series and having this really delightful, really charming sort of October run. And the Padres seem primed for something like that. Like, sort of, it was when they missed the postseason in 2021, it was a little bit of panic. This team, the vibes are bad, even though they spent all this money. And right, it's like they could make the championship series and maybe bow out there this year, and everybody would be like, never mind, we're back in. This team is great. We love that they're spending so much money. And I actually think that, like, that is not total sort of randomness. That speaks to something that people in baseball understand, and they'll say it in sort of various ways, which is that, like, you can only give yourself chances, essentially, and so you have to give yourself as many chances as possible. That sounds really obvious, but that's what people at the sort of front office level understand, and what maybe good or free spending owners understand is kind of that, like, you can't build a single team targeted to win the World Series and just be like, all right, we're going to do that, then we're going to pare back, then we're going to do that again. All you can do is buy yourself, in a literal sense and also just in a sort of metaphorical sense, as many opportunities as possible to kind of catch lightning in a bottle. And the Padres seem really set on doing that, on sort of extending by their players. They're kind of trying to do the Braves thing, but also spend a lot. It's like, they're like, what if we did both the Dodgers thing and the Braves thing at the same time? Then we have twice as many chances.
I actually wanted to mention, so the point you made about giving yourself as many chances as possible is very true. That's what all the baseball teams kind of know and think of, like, if you put too many eggs in the basket of one year, kind of a fool's errand. You might be a 111 win team like the Dodgers and get bounced in a 3-game series or 5-game series. Sorry about it. It happens. So, but that is often used as a reason to not spend like the Padres. That is often evidence, proffered for keeping it below the competitive balance tax, so you can keep investing over and over and over and over again without ever shooting the moon. I'd say the Dodgers actually do this. Sometimes they're doing it this year where they dip under. The Red Sox basically shipped out their front office to try to do this. That hasn't worked yet. The Guardians are an example of a team that does this on a much smaller market level, where they're just constantly shuffling and looking for a player who will take a below market extension so that they can keep doing these incremental moves. So I think what the Padres are doing is it's a very exorbitant version of that, where they're trying to get an entire core together for 5 to 10 years and hope it stays good and together. I just want to, for sheer, if you have forgotten all the players that they have signed long term, I just want to give the list real quick. Right. There's Manny Machado. There's Xander Bogaerts now. They just signed Jake Cronenworth to a long deal. There's the Fernando Tatis extension, after which he has barely played. There, on the pitching side, there's Joe Musgrove, San Diego kid who threw the team's first no-hitter. There's Yu Darvish, who is very old, but is now extended for 6 more years at a reasonable price for the next couple of years. Maybe not after that. And I think I'm missing someone, but that is a long list of players who are now on long deals, and that is more tied up than most teams are.
You're right. I guess you're right. I was saying a thing that, like, they're giving themselves all these chances, which you're right is exactly the opposite of what the concern trolling other owners are doing when they talk about the Padres, is saying you're not giving yourself enough chances. You're sort of mortgaging your future for your present. To which I say there's a tendency among baseball owners to, maybe not baseball owners, there's a tendency among smart people, I think, to feel as if the future is maybe more controllable than the present in some ways. Hear me out. Let me try to work on this take while I talk. I think that, and it's really evident in the way that baseball front offices work, which is they kind of act as if they are the only team that is planning for the future. And thus, by doing so, they are guaranteeing themselves success in a way that current success can't be guaranteed, because you're so aware of the volatility in the present moment and the competition in the present moment. And I actually think that that's a fallacy that the Padres are in some ways taking advantage of by being like, what if we just tried to win right now? Because we already know who the good players are now, instead of trying to like get ahead of everybody else in a way that like may or may not pan out. And yes, it will be cheaper, but it's, you know, you're up against everybody else who's trying to do the same thing. And also you're up against like the vagaries of player development and health and all that kind of thing. So that's my first point, which is that I appreciate the fact that they are not acting as if they are going to outsmart everybody else. My second point is something that like, okay, so we are quick on baseball Twitter, particularly, to say like, they can afford it. Like, don't say they can't, say they won't, type of thing. And I think that's very true. All these owners, they have lots of money. They literally can afford all of these things. But I think they take it a step further and sort of be like, what are they doing if not spending their money on a baseball team? Like this is true of all the recent free spending owners, Steve Cohen, Peter Seidler, John Middleton. There's a sense that like they are enjoying being owners more because of how much money they are spending. And that seems so obvious that it feels ridiculous that we have to say it as like an argument in favor of spending it. It's like, if you are someone who has $1 billion and you can do whatever you want with it, you can like, I don't know, buy a coral reef or go to space or like own a lot of art that you enjoy looking at. You can do nice things with it too. You can, I don't know, like pay off some medical debt and contribute to charity, but you can also just, you can spend it on whatever interests you. And the expectation that spending your money on whatever interests you should also net you more money is something we don't have to engage with. We can just be like, look, you're spending your money on a baseball team because you enjoy baseball teams, and because by spending all this money, they let you hang out in the clubhouse and pick up baseballs after batting practices, which is what John Middleton loves to do around the Phillies. And like, I don't need to care if you make money in the process of doing that. Baseball teams are fun. They're an entertainment product. If you are an owner who's spending a lot of money on Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis and Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove, you're probably having a blast. And I don't need to care whether or not that also financially benefits you. That sort of emotionally and just personally benefits you. Like, what's the point? Truly, I mean this in like an actual sort of philosophical sense. Like, what is the point of having a lot of money if not to spend it on something fun for yourself? The point of having a lot of money is not actually to make more money. And that is, we got a bunch of boring billionaires out there who treat their money as like a means to more money. And at some point, go ahead and spend it on something fun, like a really good baseball team.
Well, it's a concept we don't apply to anyone else in the sports world of,
Exactly.
Fans. I think a lot of people, and especially Green Bay Packers fans, like to talk about the stake they have in their team, that they are stakeholders in a team. And has your team ever paid you to go to a game? Like, no, exactly. You buy your ticket, you get the fun part. That, this is very Mad Men, that's what the money is for, but you pay them and you get enjoyment. And obviously, a team owner is in a different situation where he's running the business and the stewardship of the franchise falls under his money. But the point ultimately is to bring pride and winning and fun. And the part where it gets a little more complicated is that the winning ties into the fun. And you can be John Middleton, the Phillies owner, and you can really enjoy getting to know Bryce Harper and like having Kyle Schwarber on the team and having Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. But at a certain point, the fun does need it runs out if it's always disappointing at the end of the season, right. If the team is not winning. And so I think we have to commend Peter Seidler, who is just the most stereotypical baseball fan who came into several $1 billion and decided to buy a team. I mean, his Twitter handle and Instagram handles, which I'm pretty sure are real, are like Padre Pedro 77. It's peak guy who posts on a message board stuff. And so this guy is really into it. He is happy to spend the money on the baseball stars that he likes. And clearly, AJ Preller, the general manager, has walked into a situation where he can go collecting stars pretty much at will and get buy-in. And that is all great. You can see it in the ticket sales in San Diego. They had to cap season ticket sales because too many people wanted season tickets, which that sounds like you're running a pretty good business. So that's the part that I think it loops back around on, which is you do need to win to some extent, which they have won to some extent. And you need to generate that excitement because you do want to be able to sustain it long enough so that your fun is maximized and so that the winning ties into the fun. And right now, I think what the Padres are doing certainly falls into that category because they are making their team a much bigger deal. Yeah. They're eventually going to come to a TV deal negotiation that they will be able to get much more money for, or some different situation with TV and media rights in the future where their team will suddenly draw much more money than it did before. And as long as they can sustain enough playoff appearances and enough good performances from these players they're paying, they're going to be in a better spot because of that. I think there's this level of they have to win the World Series. And let me tell you, that is not true. You do not have to win the World Series to sustain this level of spending and this level of energy. It might feel disappointing if you don't, but if you look at the Tigers, a team that did this in the early 2000s, they went from being a terrible record-losing team to the second highest payroll, and they had Miguel Cabrera forever. They signed Maglio Ordonez, Carlos Guillen, Dontre Willis. They had a bunch of fun players. They never won the World Series, but they went 15 years where they were top 5 in payroll in all but 2 seasons. And they just kept going to the playoffs and kept supporting baseball in Detroit. And, it worked out.
Right. I sort of say philosophically, I don't enjoy discussing whether or not baseball teams are making their owners more money because that feels like, why do we care? But you're right. There's also the other argument, which is like, maybe it is making him money because, first of all, baseball teams are incredibly good investments. And if he was running low on funds, he could always sell them. The like non-sale even of the Angels supported that just based on the reported and rumored numbers around what it was going to go for. But yeah, also this idea just that like a better team is a better business. And that thinking has used to be true. And then it fell by the wayside when TV deals and centralized revenues and like real estate around the ballpark became a bigger portion of teams' income than merely ticket sales. But ticket sales are still like a substantial point. And to your point about like whether they need to win the World Series, it's actually right. It's like the regular season is maybe not as interesting to the casual fan, but it is undeniably a larger chunk of time, of games, of potential ticket sales, of what it means to be a season ticket holder. And so after the lockout, ahead of the 2022 spring training, at the beginning of the 2022 spring training, Hal Steinbrenner talked to the media and said something about how no fan base should go into the season feeling like their team has no chance. And that's unfortunately not what happens. Well, plenty of fan bases go into the season knowing the team has no chance. And really, I think it's like more than anything else, what you need to do is avoid that. That is what, one, kills fan interest, two, gets people to cancel their season tickets. Justin Doherty at the Washington Post did a story recently on what the Nationals sort of bottoming out has done to the business of the Nationals, to the sort of ad sales and ticket sales and season ticket interest. And so, right, it's like, I think in some ways, as incredible as it would be to see a deep postseason run by the Padres from, one, a national interest, they've got a lot of fun players, and especially from a sort of San Diego interest, and this idea that like they're the only men's professional sports league and that they are still looking for their first title, and that there's all these things that a postseason run brings to San Diego. But more than that, maybe from a business perspective, what they're doing is telling their fans ahead of time there's going to be a lot of years in which it will be fun to come to the ballpark, and that's a reason to become a season ticket holder, or right, just sort of emotionally invest in the team in a way that has some staying power. That said, how you feel about their chances? We should talk some baseball.
I feel good about their chances for the next several years. I don't know if they're going to keep Juan Soto. I don't know if they're going to keep Josh Hader, two kind of cornerstones that they acquired at the trade deadline last year, but they have enough pieces. Some of them play all the same positions, but they'll figure it out. And I think they have enough of a base to sustain them until they can rebuild a farm system to start backfilling. That's the other thing, is they traded a lot of people for Juan Soto and Josh Hader. And they need to be basically sufficient with major leaguers for the next 2 to 3 years while they re-identify talent, get that talent ready to come up and help. And I think they're pretty much going to do that. You can say Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado, will they be good in 8-9 years? No idea. Will they be good for the next 2 to 3? Like, yes, take it to the bank. Those guys play every day and they play well. There is no imminent sign that either of those guys is going to fall off a cliff soon. I think the pitchers are pretty stable. They could use some more help in that department. But I liked some of the gambles they took with Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo this offseason to try interesting guys as starters in this landscape. I think is an interesting bet. If it works, great. If not, they still have 3 very solid starters in Musgrove, Darvish, and Blake Snell.
Yeah, the Padres are interesting because it's like, if it works, everyone will be like, of course, they have great players. And if it doesn't work, and by work, I mean like a deep October run, everyone will be like, this is a weirdly constructed team. Perhaps being savvy is more important than being bold. But I don't know that those things will necessarily determine how their October goes. Does that make sense? Like it's one of those where it's like, yeah, exactly. Like you could really see it either way is what I'm saying. Like you could make the argument that like, in fact, I wrote an article at some point over the offseason that was like, just sign good players, I guess. Don't sort of stress about team construction, or don't overly stress about team construction. But also, I don't work in a front office, and you could absolutely convince me that stressing about team construction and sort of sweating the small details of like making sure that you're filling needs in a targeted way is better, more important, more effective than just like bulk talent. Probably either one can be true.
Yeah,
like, you know what I
think
mean?
you can get to the World Series in many different ways.
Right.
I think the thing I wrote about the Phillies and Dave Dombrowski last postseason applies to the Padres too, which is when you commit so much of your roster's talent in bulk at the very top, that makes you a little bit more boom or bust in the regular season because, Bryce Harper's elbow could hurt. Manny Machado could sprain his ankle and actually have to miss time. Whatever the case is, it makes you more vulnerable to regular season fluctuation if the top 5 guys on your roster are infinitely better than the 27th, where a lot of teams, one we're going to talk about momentarily, keep that gap narrower. So it does create a boom or bust situation. But I think in the playoffs, if you have all those stars going, it is a really powerful formula. And I don't know if the Padres are going to pull the Dave Dombrowski and go to the World Series over and over and over again with, sporadic disappointments littered in. But if they do, that would be a big success because Dave Dombrowski keeps getting to the World Series. And if the Padres pull off anything like that, this will be viewed very positively.
Yeah, right. We'll just close this out by saying, like, it is every team or every person working in a front office wants to know what the secret sauce is to working in October. And I think you can convince yourself there is none and that it's all random. And you can convince yourself that whatever the most recent team that won the World Series is had the right formula. And that's what keeps it interesting.
It is.
All right. We're just going to stay in the NL West, apparently, because you're going to tell me about a Dodgers player and a Dodgers player or the whole Dodgers? Who are you bandwagoning, Zach?
I'm gonna bandwagon a specific Dodgers player who stands in for what the Dodgers have done differently this year than they have done in the past, and certainly what they've done differently than the Padres. I'm bandwagoning James Outman. He is a strapping young-ish fellow who is in his first real season in MLB. He's an outfielder. He's big. He plays center field, though. He's fast and he is powerful. He's pretty old for a rookie. He is 25 years old and was not a big deal, I would say. Just, no one really saw James Outman when he was 21 years old and said, yes, this is going to be the starting center fielder on a World Series contender. That was not really in the cards. He struck out a lot. He had good power, but wasn't making the rounds in a way that everyone saw this coming. Well, last season, he demolished the minors. I mean, he blazed a trail through AA and AAA, made it to the majors for like 3 games and managed to hit like 500 in those games. And then in spring training, the Dodgers came to spring training with no real reinforcements. They lost Trey Turner. Trevor Bauer, who was on the team but suspended, they cut him. They didn't really do a lot to add to the team. After the 111 win season last year, a lot of people saw the Dodgers falling back, especially compared to the Padres. They are relying on James Outman and Miguel Vargas in the lineup. Miguel Vargas plays second base. And they're just going with it. And so far, Outman is hitting like crazy. He is hitting home runs. He is hitting triples. He is playing good defense in center. And he is delightfully weird. This is a strange human being who has a pet rock in his locker. He was talking to everybody about it in spring training. The pet rock has a name. It is named Rocka. And he feeds it coffee is the phrasing. You can see the little coffee dribbles on the rock in his locker. And I think his name has great pun potential. It is being used for puns a lot right now.
It would have better pun potential if he was a pitcher, but that's fine. I'll allow it. Yeah. Is this okay? We're not supposed to take anything seriously because it's so early in the season. Oh, it's just small sample size. Is there something about what he's doing that seems particularly sustainable or particularly kind of like the Dodgers? They found something or figured something out or taught him something, and now he's going to be great forever and become a household name, not just because his name is good?
I don't know if he's going to be great forever. I think the sustainable thing is that he hits the ball very hard. That is a signature thing that you can look at in very, very small samples and say, okay, this man can hit the ball X miles an hour. That trait on its own is a start and a sign of something. The fact that he has so far done it consistently in a very small major league sample does not mean that he will do that forever, but it does mean that the ability is there, and especially given the way it played out in spring training. You know, the Dodgers brought in Jason Hayward, they brought in David Peralta, and frankly, those guys both look good. They have Trace Thompson, Klay Thompson's brother, and he played well in the WBC and in spring, but James Outman outdid them all in spring.
He outmanned him.
He outmanned them all, and he kind of won the biggest shot at playing time. There's going to be spread around. It's the Dodgers. They're going to play everyone. But James Outman is getting the lion's share of the plate appearances because he is lefty and there are more right-handed pitchers. And he's running with them. He's doing everything right so far. I think the minor league performance recently is the other sign of, okay, maybe this guy really just figured something out a little later than most people do. And I would encourage you to watch him because he's got a little bit of the Cody Bellinger thing to him that the Dodgers saw, which is this man is very large, but also he runs very fast. Let's put him in center field. I bet he can do it. So far, he's done it. And he is surprising in that he does hit homers, but he can get extra base hits in other ways with his legs. And I think all around, the issue is going to be the strikeout rate. Can he keep it down? If he keeps it remotely in okay territory, I think he's going to be a really useful player. And yes, we're going to look back in September and be like, you know, the Scooby-Doo, those darned kids, like, yeah, those dang Dodgers did it again. They took up a player who no one had heard of and made him just as good as, you know, Cody Bellinger, probably.
That didn't pan out great, though, to be honest. Just saying, the Cody Bellinger thing. How's Cody Bellinger doing? Should we check in on him? When should we check in on him? Not till the end of April. I don't even want to know. Give him to the end of April.
You don't want to know?
I don't want to know. Give it to the end of April. Because I don't want to judge him harshly. I'm rooting for him. I love an older rookie, although it's not actually great for their long-term earning potential. But it is great for those of us who think we're still coming into our better years. I don't know, man. It sounds great. I'm not going to be like, no, he's going to be bad. Because that would be mean to a specific dude. That's the problem with bandwagoning one guy. I can't say anything against. He seems lovely, him and his pet rock. Yeah. Do you think the pet rock is serious? Do you think the pet rock is sincere? Or is he laughing at all of us for buying into this bit?
He might be laughing at us. I don't make a huge distinction there. I think he marches to the beat of his own drum a little bit. That is really what I'm saying with the pet rock thing, is that he's got a personality that he does not feel the need to either hide from us, or he's putting one on that's interesting. I'll take either one. That's great for a baseball player.
That's a great point.
Either one works.
I do always think about the fact that, like, why be a boring baseball player? If you want to be private, be an interesting baseball player in a fake way. I won't know the difference. Like, the bit that I always say about baseball players is that, like, if somebody cared what I ate for breakfast, I would never shut up. And, like, I would love for them to tell me what they ate for breakfast. They could make it up and I wouldn't know, and I would report it credulously, and I would be delighted to have a detail. And so you're right. We should applaud Mr. Outman for his commitment to giving us some kind of specific unique fodder to understand him by, and I love that for all of us. So yeah, good bandwagon. We've got so far we're bandwagoning the Rays, looking great, and James Outman, which is probably looking great because he plays for the Dodgers and he's someone no one heard of before this year. So I'm sure it's going to pan out wonderfully. We should go for a higher degree of difficulty next time. We gotta start selling people on, like, more difficult sells than just like the Dodgers. They probably found a good player, and the Rays, they're winning. Okay, that's all we've got for you this week. We did not discuss the dong bong because I have unfun takes about it, which is what? It's just water?
For context, the dong bong, if anyone's unfamiliar.
No context. If you don't know, Google it.
I think we have to give dong bong context real quick. That is The Baltimore Orioles' new home run celebration is, a beer bong that the home run hitter takes, except they don't put beer in it, they put water in it. So the dong, the home run, and the bong, the beer bong. So dong bong, that's what we're talking about.
I believe that's actually specifically what they said they were not going to call it, but I'm not calling it a dong bong shirt has people asking a lot of questions already answered by their dong bong shirt. So that's what we're going to call it. If you want to stay in touch, you want to talk to us, you want to see what else we're doing other than talking to each other, you can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Hannah R. Kaiser. He's at Z Kreiser. And if you've made it this far, you should definitely subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube channel. Leave us a review, tell a friend, and we will be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.